Family court, a place where you expect justice, not heartbreak. It's supposed to be a sanctuary for families in crisis, a place where the law protects the innocent and ensures fairness for all. But sometimes, the very system designed to keep families together can fail them in the most devastating ways. But what if a court order is just a piece of paper? What if, despite the official stamps and signatures, it holds no real power when someone chooses to ignore it? What if a parent decides the law doesn't apply to them? What happens when one person's belief in their own righteousness outweighs the rules meant to protect everyone? I've seen it. Parents, convinced they know best, taking the law into their own hands. In their desperation, they cross a line, stealing not just a child's time, but their entire sense of safety and belonging. This isn't just a disagreement, it's abduction. It's a crime that leaves scars on everyone involved, especially the children caught in the middle. Let's go back to a case from the early 2020s, a case that changed everything. It started like so many others, with a custody battle and a family torn apart by conflict. It involved a boy named Daniel, his father Mark, and a mother who believed she was above the law. Their lives would become the center of a legal storm that exposed deep flaws in the system. Their story exposed a terrifying loophole in family law, one that allowed a parent to disappear with a child, leaving the other parent helpless and the courts scrambling to respond. This case forced lawmakers to act, giving judges a tool they desperately needed: the power to order GPS ankle monitors in high-risk custody disputes, a measure once reserved only for criminals. Before this, GPS tracking was for criminals, not parents. The idea of using it in family court was unthinkable, until it became necessary. But the line between civil dispute and crime can blur in an instant. When a child's safety is at stake, the consequences of inaction are too great to ignore. The case of Daniel and Mark forced a reckoning about prevention, enforcement, and the court's duty to protect children. It made everyone ask, how far should the law go to keep kids safe? This is the story of how one family's nightmare changed family law forever, and why the fight to protect children is far from over. Mark and Sarah's custody battle was bitter from the start, filled with accusations, tense confrontations, and sleepless nights. Their friends and family watched helplessly as the conflict escalated, each side convinced they were fighting for Daniel's best interests. Mark was a steady, reliable father. Sarah, increasingly unstable, grew more desperate with every court date. She vowed Mark would never have custody of their son Daniel, no matter what the judge decided. The judge, after months of hearings and evidence, saw through Sarah's tactics and granted Mark sole custody. Sarah was allowed only supervised visits, a decision that left her devastated and furious. Mark thought the nightmare was finally over. He believed the court's decision would bring peace and stability for Daniel. On the day of the first custody exchange, Mark waited anxiously at the police station, clutching the court order. But Sarah never showed up, and Daniel was nowhere to be seen. Her phone was off. Hours dragged by, each minute heavier than the last. Dread and panic set in as Mark realized something was terribly wrong. Mark's lawyer filed an emergency motion, but legal paperwork couldn't bring back a missing child or undo what had already happened. By nightfall, it was clear. Sarah had vanished with Daniel. The city felt emptier, the silence more ominous. Investigators later discovered Sarah had meticulously planned her escape, emptying her bank accounts, selling her car, and cutting all ties to her old life. She created new identities for herself and Daniel, forging documents and packing only essentials, determined to disappear without a trace. In her mind, she was protecting her son from a system she believed had failed them. But in reality, it was abduction, an act that would haunt both their lives. Daniel was now a missing child, his face on posters, his name whispered in urgent police briefings. The system's safeguards had failed, leaving only questions and heartbreak in their wake. Mark was left with only hope, and a desperate search ahead, clinging to memories and the faint possibility of reunion. The law, as it stood, was powerless to stop her, leaving Mark and Daniel's fate hanging in uncertainty. The search for Daniel began with a sense of urgency and dread. His disappearance sent shockwaves through his family, who immediately feared the worst. Every hour that passed felt heavier, as if time itself was working against them. But when Mark and his family turned to the police for help, their pleas were met with skepticism. Officers dismissed the case as just another family dispute, not a potential abduction. The lack of immediate action left the family feeling helpless and alone. Mark pleaded for urgency, his voice cracking with desperation. He knew Sarah could be anywhere, and that every moment counted. But the authorities seemed unmoved, their indifference compounding his fear. It wasn't until the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children flagged Daniel's case as high risk that the FBI finally got involved. The shift was immediate. Suddenly, there was real attention, real resources, and a sense that someone was finally listening. But Sarah had planned her escape meticulously. She left no digital footprint, her phone was off, credit cards untouched, and she avoided anything that could be traced. It was as if she and Daniel had vanished into thin air. With no leads from technology, agents turned to old-fashioned detective work. They pored over maps, studied Sarah's past, and tried to predict her next move. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, as hope began to fade. Then a break came, a tip about a woman and boy living off-grid in rural Oregon. They paid only in cash, kept to themselves, and seemed to always be looking over their shoulders. It was the first real lead in months. Agents moved quickly, staking out the isolated cabin. After days of surveillance, they finally spotted a thin, long-haired boy outside. It was Daniel. The team approached quietly, determined not to spook him or Sarah. Sarah surrendered without resistance, her face calm but resigned. The long ordeal was finally coming to an end. Daniel, frightened and bewildered, was gently comforted by officers. He was safe, but the trauma of the past months was clear in his eyes. After 6 agonizing months, Mark received the call he'd been praying for. "We have your son." Relief and disbelief washed over him as he rushed to the station for an emotional reunion. The ordeal was over, but the scars remained. The family's home, once filled with laughter, now felt somber and changed by the trauma they'd endured. The system had failed Daniel from the very beginning. Outrage grew as more families came forward, demanding answers and accountability. The case would soon force a reckoning in family law, as lawmakers and judges realized the urgent need for reform. It was clear, something had to change. The public demanded it, and the courts could no longer ignore the consequences of inaction. The cost of ignoring these cases was too high, a price paid by children and families across the country. Daniel's story was about to reshape the law, ensuring that no child would be left unprotected again. Back in court, the judge was furious. His order had been powerless to prevent Daniel's abduction. Mark's reunion with Daniel was bittersweet. The trauma was deep. The judge admitted he'd seen the warning signs, but had no tools to stop Sarah from fleeing. Family court could only react after the fact. By then, the damage was done. Legal experts and advocates asked, why wait for a child to go missing before acting? In criminal court, Sarah faced kidnapping charges. In family court, the system's failures were exposed. The judge's final ruling was a scathing critique. If he'd been able to order a GPS monitor, Daniel's abduction could have been prevented. A simple alert could have stopped Sarah before she disappeared. This opinion became a rallying cry for reform. The case highlighted the dangerous gap between civil orders and real-world enforcement. The law needed to change before another child vanished. Daniel's ordeal became the catalyst. The push for GPS monitoring in family court had begun. Before Daniel's case, family court judges had little power beyond their courtroom. Orders relied on parents' willingness to comply. If a parent defied the order, the court's options were slow and reactive: contempt charges, hearings, paperwork. By then, a child could be long gone. Judges could see the danger, but were powerless to act preemptively. The system assumed parents would follow the rules. Daniel's abduction proved that assumption deadly wrong. The legal community realized courts needed more than punishment. They needed prevention. The call for real enforcement had never been louder. Daniel's story sparked national outrage and a powerful movement for change. Advocacy groups and parents demanded action, rallying behind Daniel's law. The goal: give judges the authority to order GPS monitoring in high-risk custody cases. Lawmakers debated fiercely, using Daniel's case as their rallying cry. Mark became the face of the movement, testifying about the terror and trauma he and Daniel endured. His words made the issue real, no longer just legal theory. Daniel's law proposed that judges, with credible evidence of flight risk, could require a parent to wear a GPS monitor. Criteria included past threats, non-compliance, and lack of community ties. Sarah's case was cited as the exact scenario the law aimed to prevent. The movement gained unstoppable momentum. The system was on the verge of real change. The passage of Daniel's law transformed family court. Judges now had a proactive tool, GPS monitoring for high-risk cases. It wasn't used lightly. Judges had to document clear evidence of flight risk. Monitors were fitted by approved companies, with alerts for exclusion zones like airports or state borders. If a parent violated the order, law enforcement and the other parent were notified instantly. The law turned paper orders into real-time protection. Implementation had challenges: protocols, costs, and logistics, but the core function was clear. For the first time, a judge's order had teeth. If Sarah had worn a monitor, Daniel would never have disappeared. The gap in the law was finally closed. Not everyone welcomed GPS monitoring in family court. Civil liberties advocates argued it was a major invasion of privacy, usually reserved for criminals. They worried about presuming guilt and the potential for misuse. Wearing a monitor could affect a parent's job, relationships, and dignity. Supporters countered, a child's safety must come first. The law was narrowly tailored for extreme cases, not routine disputes. Daniel's ordeal made the stakes clear: 6 months of trauma versus temporary surveillance. The debate continues, forcing courts to balance privacy with protection. Judges must justify each order, ensuring the tool is used only when truly necessary. Daniel's law sparked an ongoing conversation about rights and safety. Daniel's case changed family law forever. His ordeal exposed a fatal flaw and led to real reform. Daniel's law. GPS monitoring is now a vital, carefully used tool in high-risk custody disputes. It deters abductions and provides early warnings, giving families security. The privacy debate remains, ensuring the law is used responsibly. Judges must weigh evidence and justify their decisions, protecting both children and parents' rights. The law's legacy is balance: technology with oversight, safety with respect for freedom. Daniel's story proves laws must evolve to meet new threats. Paper orders aren't enough. Real protection requires real power. Because of one lost boy, countless children are safer today. The system is stronger, more proactive, and no longer leaves a child's fate to chance. Daniel's legacy is hope and a safer future for families everywhere.